This morning attacked Croatian forces near Sturmica, just inside the border of the Krajina region.
Knin is the capital of Croatia's Serbs, symbol of their rebellion, and for months now Croatian regular forces have been creeping towards it. Their sudden advance through Bosnian territory has outflanked the Serb defenders and brought them to the outskirts of the village of Sturmica, less than 10 miles away. There have been exchanges of artillery fire for several days now. This morning, the Croatian Serbs launched an air raid.
At 06:30 hours this morning, 3 fixed-wing aircraft belonging to the so-called ARSK were observed conducting offensive actions on Croat positions in the Sturmica area.
The Bosnian government is claiming that Serbia proper is preparing to join the battle. A spokesman told journalists in Sarajevo that long columns of vehicles were moving across the north of the country and said they were carrying Serbian regulars from the Yugoslav army. Croatia appears now to have completed its military build-up, with troop concentrations facing most major Serb positions. They're not hiding their preparations. It's almost as though they're testing how everyone will respond to what they're planning.
We observed very massive movements and deployments of Croatian troops in all directions surrounding sector north and south. Our assessment of our military is that, yes, they seem to be fully prepared to attack.
For the moment, the fighting around Bihać, which provided Croatia with a pretext for its troop movements, is declining in intensity. Croatian Serbs appear to be pulling back to defend their own territory, leaving the Bosnian Serbs and the rebel Muslims fighting on against Bosnian government forces. Brian Hanrahan, BBC News.
The International Red Cross
called on the former Yugoslav army to help him fight the advancing Croats. Paul Davis at ITN reports.
The Bosnian Serbs and their allies are holding crisis meetings, not because America has moved one step closer to lifting the arms embargo, and not because of the increased threat of NATO airstrikes. It is the prospect of all-out conflict with the Croatian army that prompted this council of war, the commanders of Serbian forces in Bosnia and Croatia meeting in the Bosnian town of Durova. Afterwards, the unlikely sight of the Bosnian Serb leader appealing for help from the outside world.
We expect help from the entire international community, because this is a mere example of aggression of the Republic of Croatia.
Dr. Karadzic is also appealing to Belgrade to send the might of the former Yugoslavian army to support these rebel Serb troops digging in around Durova, expecting a renewal of the Croatian offensive that has already captured 2 towns. Despite peace talks planned for tomorrow, the UN say the fighting and the massing of forces continues.
We now assess that there are as many as 100,000 Croatian soldiers fully mobilized and battle-ready, and as many as 50,000 on the Serb side.
The hills around Durova seem likely to be the next battlefront. The Bosnian Serbs claim these defences came under artillery fire this morning, an attack that killed 2 of their soldiers.
Here, lawyers acting...
Withdrawing its entire peacekeeping force from the eastern Bosnian enclave of Žepa after the French government ordered its contingent to leave. 2 civilian officials will try and determine the fate of thousands of Muslims said to be hiding out in surrounding hills. In Geneva, a Croatian government delegation has arrived for tomorrow's peace talks with rebel Serbs, but diplomats fear that the talks will do little to prevent the looming threat of an all-out war, as troops from all sides in the conflict continue their massive deployment on the front lines. The United Nations said 50,000 rebel Krajina Serbs have begun mobilizing in Serb-held territories in Croatia and Bosnia, preparing to counter a full-scale Croat attack. The UN also claimed several hundred Serb forces were advancing over the border into the besieged enclave of Bihać, despite promises at the weekend to withdraw. Amid reports that Croatian forces have shelled another Serb-held village, Sturmica, the Bosnian Serb leader Radovan Karadzic appealed to all Serbs to join his battle against the Croatian advance. He also called for wider international intervention. In the Croatian port of Split, more British troops have now arrived aboard American aircraft. The soldiers from the 24th Air Mobile Brigade are intended to bolster the UN Rapid Reaction Force in Bosnia. And in Brussels, NATO put itself on a war footing. Its ambassadors decided to expand their threat of airstrikes against the Bosnian Serbs should they attack any more UN-designated safe areas. Well, at the same time, the chief prosecutor of the International War Crimes Tribunal has told Channel 4 News that the Bosnian Serb leaders Radovan Karadzic and General Mladic will eventually stand trial for genocide and crimes against humanity. In his first television interview since the Bosnian Serb leaders were indicted, Justice Richard Goldstone said that the War Crimes Tribunal now has enough evidence to put them on trial. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Gabi Rado, reports from The Hague on how those accused of war crimes could now be brought to justice.
When General Ratko Mladic made sure he was filmed asking Muslim refugees from Žepa about their welfare last week, he could have had an ulterior motive. Just 24 hours previously, the International War Crimes Tribunal had charged him with genocide and crimes against humanity. On the bus, he may well have been preparing his defense. The Bosnian Serb general and his political master, Radovan Karadzic, have both so far ignored the tribunal's indictment, as have more than 40 other Serbs accused of war crimes by name. And as long as they stay in Serb-held lands, there's no authority which can reach them. The War Crimes Tribunal on former Yugoslavia in The Hague has as its chief prosecutor Justice Richard Goldstone, who investigated right-wing dirty tricks in South Africa during the early 90s. In an interview with Channel 4 News today, he spoke of his belief that ultimately the indicted Serb leaders will face trial.
One never knows what happens in the political world. At the moment it's unlikely, as long as they remain where they are. Whether they're prepared to spend the rest of their lives living where they are or not, obviously, is another matter. And whether or not they will be allowed to live for the rest of their lives where they are is another matter. But we're acting under the authority of the whole of the international community through the Security Council. And I don't accept for a moment that it's inevitable that they're not going to stand trial.
It was following the revelations of the inhumane Bosnian Serb detention camps that the UN set up the first war crimes court since the Second World War. It was immediately criticized as being merely a face-saving measure by a UN ashamed of its helplessness to stop the horrors of Bosnia. As the refugee expulsions following the fall of Srebrenica last month showed, the fighting and the war crimes are still continuing. It makes the task of collecting evidence against suspects far more difficult than it was against the defeated Nazis. But the prosecutor is sure of the charges he's made.
In the indictments we've issued, we are satisfied that the evidence on which we rely is obtainable. I wouldn't issue an indictment against somebody on evidence I couldn't readily obtain. That's not the way that these things should be approached.
Dusan Tadic is the only one of the 46 indicted Serbs who's in the custody of the tribunal, having been arrested in Germany last year. He's accused of murder and torture at the Omarska detention camp. His actual trial has not yet begun as procedural matters are being argued out. The defense lawyers assigned to him are challenging the very right of the tribunal to exist.
For some 50 years, they've tried to establish a permanent international criminal court. We think that that's the way to do it, and not to create a court for Yugoslavia and a court for Rwanda, and they have not established courts under similar circumstances in other wars.
The tribunal judges will decide on the defense submission next week. They're likely to reject it, but the idea of a standing war crimes court is finding favor.
I support unequivocally the creation of a permanent international criminal court. What we have with the two ad hoc courts is a lot better than nothing, a lot better than doing nothing, but certainly not the best way of doing it.
The British UN commander, Lieutenant General Rupert Smith's routine meeting with General Mladic 2 days ago illustrated a problem which may deflect the tribunal's purpose in the future. Whether or not they're charged with war crimes, military and political leaders are daily involved in negotiations with the UN. The prominent role played by Radovan Karadzic in the Bosnian peace talks at Geneva was criticized by many as giving him credibility. But when an eventual peace agreement becomes possible, those indicted are likely to want immunity from prosecution before signing.
That immunity, if it's to be granted to any of them, can only be granted by the Security Council. There's no other way in which they can be granted an immunity, because this tribunal operates under a Chapter 7 resolution of the Security Council. So no combination of states acting outside the Security Council could achieve that.
Richard Goldstone has also been appointed Chief Prosecutor for the War Crimes Tribunal for Rwanda, where almost certainly far more people died in a few murderous months than have been killed in 4 years of war in former Yugoslavia. But because the Rwandan civil war is effectively over and there is access to the evidence and witnesses, he expects to encounter fewer obstacles.
In effect, what we're looking at is the genocide that was committed in April, May and into June of last year, and that's it. Anything that would happen in Rwanda now, or indeed since the 1st of January of this year, simply doesn't fall within our jurisdiction. We have no power to investigate it. In the case of the former Yugoslavia, our temporal jurisdiction began on the 1st of January 1991, and it's open-ended. What happens there today falls within our jurisdiction to investigate, and that presumably will remain the position until there's peace.
Until then, all the tribunal can do is try its one and only suspect under arrest, issue more charges, indictments against Bosnian Croats and Muslims are expected this year, and use the authority of the UN to press for the accused to be brought to trial. After early skepticism about how tough and effective it's likely to be, the War Crimes Tribunal now wants to show that it means business. If any of those so far indicted and still at large in Serb-held areas wants to travel abroad, even if to take part in peace talks, the War Crimes Tribunal is prepared to ask that they be arrested by the host country. Gabby Rado, Channel 4 News, The Hague.
China has detained...
Talks to prevent a full-blown conflict between the Krajina Serbs and the Croatian government have broken up without agreement in Geneva. After the meeting, the Serbs accused the Croats of refusing to accept a UN-brokered peace plan. But as the talks were taking place, Croatia was continuing to mobilize its troops for an attack on the breakaway republic, a conflict which many believe could spark an all-out Balkan war. Fighting in the former Yugoslavia has recently been concentrated in northwest Bosnia and has involved numerous parties. The focus has been the UN safe haven of Bihać, which is controlled by the mainly Muslim Bosnian government. It's been under attack from three sides. From the west by Croatian Serbs who've set up their own territory of Krajina and who need Bihać to consolidate it. From the east by Bosnian Serbs keen to link their land with Krajina. And from the north by rebel Muslims who are opposed to the Bosnian government. The Croats entered the war last week in an attempt to regain Krajina, which they lost to the Serbs in 1991. But that in turn risks bringing in Serbia itself to defend the Bosnian and Croat Serbs.
Both sides sent low-level delegations to the talks, and their public responses were largely preordained. The Krajina Serbs, trying to fend off a military assault, said they were ready to negotiate. The Croats, poised to attack, said no progress had been made in the 7 hours of talks. The UN chairman is now planning to visit their bosses in Zagreb and Knin tomorrow to find out what they really think.
I think we have come closer to an agreement that at least I expected. We have not a finalized agreement, but I feel it's not far away.
Croatia's war machine is prepared and positioned. Its troops are now stationed in formidable numbers around the Krajina. Reservists have been called up, hospitals put on standby. Croatia's condition for holding back on the expected assault is that the Krajina Serbs should accept reunification. The UN proposal, a pause for negotiation, is a long way short of that. The Serbs say they agree to a UN plan to open communication links. The main oil pipeline runs through Serb-held territory, putting it out of commission. So too is the main railway line, which runs from Zagreb to the Adriatic coast. But what Croatia wants is its territory back. Since the 1991 war, Croatia has built up formidable forces. Then they were a citizens' army, while the Serbs inherited the heavy weapons of the old Yugoslavia. Now they've acquired attack helicopters, despite the arms embargo, and are much better equipped. They even have MiGs, which they said, improbably, they'd found in ready-to-assemble crates left by the Yugoslav forces. Croatia has flaunted its new weapons and its intentions in exercises and parades, but Western powers have said little to deter them from taking military action against the Krajina Serbs.
So they're quite well armed, and we know that they've spent the last 2 years very carefully training their soldiers, re-equipping them.
Iraq, the British rapid reaction
Were sent into action to retake Krajina, the fifth of their country occupied by rebel Serbs. Unconfirmed reports indicate that tonight they may be closing in on the capital Knin. The battle for Krajina, held by the rebel Serbs for 4 years, began at dawn. The Croatian army, which is more than 100,000 strong, first launched a huge artillery attack on a wide front, including Knin. It was followed by tank and infantry assaults from the north and west. The leader of the Krajinan Serbs, Milan Martic, has appealed to the international community to stop the offensive. He says if they don't, many thousands will die. The first pictures of the fighting have come via the Bosnian Serbs across the border in Pale.
The Croatian onslaught came early, and Knin, the Krajina Serb stronghold, burned in the light of dawn. For Zagreb, the time for talking had ended. President Tudjman's demand for the self-styled republic's full integration with Croatia took the form of a massive artillery barrage. Hundreds of shells rained down on the town and on other key areas throughout the Krajina. So many shells, in fact, some 300 in around half an hour, that the UN in Knin lost count. Peacekeepers on the ground used their armoured personnel carriers to find and ferry people to safety.
We're trying to get all the UN civilian people that are still left in town and still missing 30, and those EPCB and me will be making regular patrols in order to get them and to try to help the population as much as we can.
The Croat shells may well have been aimed at military, economic or political targets, but in the event many fell indiscriminately, clearly hitting houses, dropping onto other civilian areas, destroying all in their path. In Knin's hospital, the wounded and dying were brought in. The UN has spoken of a serious loss of human life, but exactly how many were killed or hurt in all this wasn't immediately clear. For doctors, the conditions were extremely difficult.
Operating theater must be put in the cellar because it's very dangerous to work upstairs because of great bombing of city of Knin and near area.
The rebel Krajina Serb forces have been fighting back in many areas. As Croat ground troops advanced towards them, the Krajina Serbs maintained they were still controlling the situation. The lines around Knin were being held. There was no panic, said one officer. Their Bosnian Serb brethren across the border want the world to condemn the Croat action.
Croatian aggression is very brutal. They target not only military but civilian targets, and the international community has to condemn this aggression and to sanction it through the Security Council. Otherwise, it's going to be big war.
The question now is whether the Serbs here in Bosnia will try to come to the aid of the Krajina Serbs. It's thought unlikely, as the Bosnian Serb forces are already thought to be stretched by the Croatian Army offensives in Western Bosnia. For now, Zagreb's punishment of the Krajina Serbs seems set to continue, come what may. Clarence Mitchell, BBC News, Pale.
Britain, Russia, France and Germany have all called on Croatia to halt its offensive against the Krajina Serbs. But the American Defense Secretary William Perry has expressed his limited support. He said he hoped their action would be successful. Our diplomatic correspondent Nicholas Witchell has been to the north of Krajina and now reports from the Croatian capital Zagreb.
The diplomacy died at dusk. The Croatian military assault began at dawn. Hundreds of their guns along the northern border of Krajina started pounding towns and villages. The Croatian military believe they can seize Krajina quickly. They claim to be responding to provocations. Their artillery poured shells onto largely civilian targets. Croatian guns also attacked several UN observation posts. One Danish peacekeeper was killed. 2 other UN soldiers were injured. It's suspected the Croatians want to mount their attack without outside witnesses. Croat guns and rockets were tucked away in fields and forests. In the distance, there was a pall of smoke from the Krajina Serb-held town of Petrinja. And on the roads, the constant movements of lorries and coaches taking more Croatian men and equipment to the front, and ambulances preparing to carry the injured away to hospital. By tonight, there were reports of substantial Croatian advances in northern Krajina. It was always expected that the Croatians would make this, the assault on Krajina's northern flank, one of their first military objectives, to try to drive the Krajina Serbs south so that their long-range weapons cannot threaten Croatia's capital city of Zagreb. The assault on northern Krajina is causing suffering on both sides. This woman is Croatian. Her home was shelled by the Krajina Serbs. More casualties, more refugees. For the United Nations, more problems.
I profoundly regret the outbreak of hostilities in Croatia, which sets back the prospects of a peaceful resolution of the conflict. I'm particularly concerned about the fate of civilians affected by the fighting.
Croatia has made its choice. It does not believe Europe or America will overly condemn it, and it does not believe Serbia proper will fight it. The battle for Krajina continues. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News, Zagreb.
And I'm now joined from Sarajevo by our correspondent Martin Bell. Martin, what's the view from there? Can the conflict in Croatia stay separate from the conflict in Bosnia?
The fear is, and the view is, that it won't. It's hard to overestimate the dangers. The UN here believes that there is a potential disaster in the making, both the war spilling over across the border and a humanitarian crisis as tens of thousands of Krajina Serbs, civilians, are driven from their homes. That's on top of the 13,000 from the Bosnian side of the border who fled before a Croatian attack just a week ago.
Will the Bosnian Serbs go to the aid of the Krajina Serbs?
They already have on a limited scale in the shelling 2 days ago of Dubrovnik. That was their work. There may be more shelling, but they are themselves very tightly stretched and for the first time under a lot of pressure on the battlefields. One thing I know from experience is that the Serbs don't like losing. They react to it very badly and angrily, and my guess is that they will do that now on both sides of the border.
How much credence is given there to the speculation that there's been a deal between Croatia and Serbia proper? That, that Serbia will not come in?
The sooner this is concluded, if it is concluded fast, the less pressure there is on Serbia to intervene. Certainly there would be some kind of a token protest, but it's hard for them to do it fast, and President Milosevic is by no means close to the Krajina Serbs, and I think he'd be willing to let them suffer for a while, despite the political damage it might do him.
And finally, and briefly, Martin, how much is known there about how the attack by Croatia is in fact going on the ground?
What we know is that it's much more serious than anything that happened in the war 4 years ago. The Serbs insist their defense lines are holding, but they're not talking about the central sector where it seems they're taking quite a beating.
Martin Bell in Sarajevo, thank you.
Here, a 30-year-old man... Troops have launched a massive military onslaught against the Serb-held region of Krajina. After a day of shelling and bombardments, Croatia claims to have made major territorial gains. In response, at least one Serb rocket has already hit the capital, Zagreb. The eastern region of Krajina was formed 4 years ago after Serb forces fought a brief war to create their self-styled republic. Its capital, Knin, is now said to be encircled by Croat troops. NATO has threatened airstrikes to protect UN peacekeepers in the area, but the Croatian Foreign Minister Mate Granic has said the attack will continue. Alex Thompson reports on the events on the ground as the former Yugoslavia is engulfed by yet another war.
Tanks backed by artillery, mechanised infantry battalions and at least 50,000 soldiers punctured the confrontation line into Serb-held Krajina from dawn. A front has now opened up across 150 miles. Croatia has planned this for months, saying it would happen in the summer if talks to reintegrate Krajina with Croatia failed. Well equipped with more than 300 heavy weapons, 200 tanks, Zagreb reckons she can retake Krajina in less than 10 days.
The reports are that at 0500 hours this morning, the Croatian Army launched an offensive on the self-proclaimed Republic of Serbia, Krajina. Intensive artillery shelling of all towns, including Knin, has continued since then.
Knin, the self-declared capital of Serb Krajina this morning. The town has been under almost constant shell fire since first light. Take the capital and the Croatian army is a long way towards taking Krajina.
On today's evidence, they are wasting no time. Already, though, the President of Croatia has been warned by diplomats he could be charged with war crimes if civilian areas are repeatedly shelled. Under constant bombardment, Knin's hospital surgeons have retreated into the basement. So often across former Yugoslavia, from Vukovar to Sarajevo, it was Serb shelling that forced the surgeons underground. In Krajina, the tables have been turned today.
Operating theater must be put in the cellar because it's very dangerous to work upstairs because of great bombing of city of Knin and near area. More than 3 hours Knin is shelled and a lot of wounded, especially civilian, is in this city.
UN soldiers in Knin, as elsewhere, can do little more than watch it happen, making occasional patrols to observe the Croat advance. This morning, Croats killed 1 Danish UN soldier and wounded 2 Polish peacekeepers. They've overrun at least 6 UN observation posts and this afternoon strafed 1 by air to try and force the peacekeepers out. It's an assault Croatia wants neither the UN nor journalists to witness. Croatia's apologised for the death, but her foreign minister is oozing with confidence that Krajina will fall within a week.
I told you approximately, naturally, but I am sure that we will finish successfully the operation.
It was a long-planned offensive by Croatia to seize back the Krajina region taken by local Serbs 4 years ago. In a 3-pronged attack, the Croatian army advanced from the north and has taken most of Krajina, an area where Krajina's Serb missiles were trained on the Croatian capital. It's believed they're now advancing towards the next town, Glina. From the southwest, the UN reports a major advance towards Gospic, using 20 tanks and a mechanized infantry battalion. South, around the Krajina Serbs' self-proclaimed capital, Knin, there's been heavy artillery bombardment since 5 a.m. this morning. Furthermore, there are reliable reports of Croatian jets bombing Gračac and Gospic. It looks clinical enough on a map. In reality, it will cause another refugee crisis. This time, the civilian refugees will be mostly Serbs.
We've already seen, as Mons has reported, over 13,000 refugees streaming into Banja Luka. We may see thousands more. So we have basically 2 potential disasters on our hands, one a military spillover, one a humanitarian catastrophe.
Krajina's Serbs have artillery and they've used it extensively today, but they know they're completely outmanned and outgunned.
Croatia is committing ethnic cleansing against our people. After a few days, the Republic of Serbia and Krajina will be empty, without houses and without Serbian people.
But this evening, the air raid sirens were wailing in Zagreb as the city went on general alert. The Croatian push was partly designed to put Krajina's Serb missiles out of range of the city, but it's unclear tonight if that has been successful.
Alex Thompson reporting. Joining us with the latest information from the Croatian capital Zagreb is the United Nations spokesman Christopher Gunnis. Christopher, can you tell us about these latest reports we've had about Serb air attacks on the Croatian capital Zagreb?
We have an unconfirmed report that at about 6:45 local time, I heard it myself, there was an explosion caused by a missile in one of the southern suburbs of Zagreb. The United Nations itself has not confirmed this, but it appears to be the case. There are also, again, unconfirmed reports that more missiles have been fired at the Croatian capital.
This is almost undoubtedly the work of the Krajinian Serbs, right?
There's no doubt about that. They have from the start made it clear that they were extremely unhappy about what they are calling the war of the cities. From 5 o'clock this morning, civilian areas all over the Krajina were being shelled. Knin itself saw about 2,000 shells today. There's widespread devastation. The town itself is in flames.
What about any military activity in and around Krajina now?
Well, it's been an extremely active day. The last reports we have are of 4 lines of approach into the Krajina, 2 from what we call sector north, south of Zagreb, 2 from the western parts of the Krajina. The Croatians are claiming significant advances. They're claiming to be near to Knin itself. We have not confirmed those, but certainly there has not been what we assess to be a credible Serb response so far.
Christopher, what realistically can the United Nations do except keep a low profile, sit back, wait for the fighting to finish and then go in and pick up the pieces?
Well, it mustn't be forgotten that we've lost a Danish peacekeeper today. 2 Poles have been injured, one of them extremely critically. We have reports too that other peacekeepers have been taken away, particularly by the Croatian Army. There's a report that today a Croatian aircraft strafed a UN observation post, again endangering UN peacekeepers. In the face of that sort of onslaught, there's actually very little we can do. We're trying to maintain a presence, we're trying to keep credible reporting from the area because the international community needs to know what's happening in the Krajina. We're also hoping to maintain a presence to deal with the displaced people, which will almost inevitably result because of this conflict, and thereafter we want to be in the community and do our best to try and monitor the human rights situation.
Kristoffer Ganis in Zagreb, thank you very much indeed. Ever since rebel Serbs took control 4 years ago, Croatia has been strengthening its military muscle, ready to retake control of the Krajina region. Some observers allege it's had the tacit support of the United States. Peter Morgan of our diplomatic unit assesses the political and military timing of today's offensive and examines the threat of an all-out war in the Balkans.
The roots of this current conflict lie on a harsh mountainside in southern Croatia, in the Serb stronghold of Knin. In the spring of 1991, open conflict between local Serbs and Croats broke out here, a clash which helped spark a wider war. Until now, Knin has remained in Serb hands, along with around 20% of Croatia, a constant rebuke to Zagreb's plans for a unified Croatian state. Knin, with its oil, rail and road links, stands in the way of these ambitions. Croatia needs to capture these connections to unite its Adriatic resorts with the central heartland around Zagreb. For 4 years, the Croatian government has sworn to regain this territory. Why, though, has it decided to act now? With elections next year, Croatia's President Tudjman is under domestic pressure to act, a point recognized when he signed a military cooperation pact with the Bosnian government last month. Centre-right members of his ruling party have long called for a forcible return of the Serb-held areas. There's a simple human reason behind this drive too. More than 300,000 Croatians are still without homes or jobs, forced out of their towns and villages during the 1991 war. An uneasy peace was signed the following year, but not observed. Both sides promised to resettle refugees, while the UN aimed to disarm Croat and Serb fighters in the disputed areas. Public anger with the UN has found vivid expression outside its Zagreb base, where the names of battle-torn towns are recalled, along with those of fallen Croatian soldiers. The UN force in Croatia has reduced in both size and authority, but remains an obstacle to Croat ambitions.
I think the main reason for Zagreb's loss of faith in the United Nations was the fact, of course, that the UN was unable to ensure the return of any of the Croats expelled from the areas where they had been living before. The other was that there was absolutely no control by the UN of any of the borders between the areas that the Serb-controlled and Bosnia and Serbia respectively, so that there was absolutely complete freedom of traffic, military and other.
Today's attack is the second chapter of the Croat offensive. In May, they overran Serb-held towns in western Slavonia, another supposed UN-protected area, without heavy resistance from local Serb forces or action from Belgrade. Zagreb has gambled again this time, guessing that President Milosevic will not step in. But the real limits to Tudjman's gamble will be tested around Vukovar, from where thousands of Croats were forced out in 1991. Any Croat action here in eastern Slavonia, on Serbia's border, could provoke a response from Belgrade. Observers, though, detect a quiet deal between the two capitals.
I think there's a fair calculation that Tudjman has given up on eastern Slavonia, and that giving away eastern Slavonia to Serbia is the price he is paying for Serbian indifference to the Krajina Serbs. And I think that probably the implicit deal, if not an explicit deal, which he's reached with Milosevic, is that he will not try to recover eastern Slavonia as long as Milosevic doesn't aid the Krajina Serbs.
Zagreb also wants to keep international support on its side, particularly in the United States and Germany. US officials have given what they call an amber light to Croatia's action, saying Croatia should proceed with caution. Formal US involvement in Croatia started with the federation deal agreed between Bosnian Croats and the Bosnian government. It's been cemented in recent months with cash aid and the help of US military instructors, senior retired soldiers who've been advising the Croatian army.
It's both moral support and as far as military operations are concerned, I know very well that the American military advisors have been present both in Croatia and in the Bosnian Federation.
The next 48 hours will show whether Croatia has calculated correctly. UN chiefs fear that a lengthy campaign with heavy Serb casualties could draw in Belgrade. It'll also alienate Zagreb's allies. Tonight, as UN forces watch from the sidelines, the potential for a wider Serb-Croat conflict remains.
Peter Morgan. There's been widespread international condemnation of the Croatian offensive, but the Western allies are already divided in their response. President Clinton said he was concerned about the fighting and urged restraint on all sides. His Defense Secretary, William Perry, was openly sympathetic with some of Zagreb's aims.
The Croatian government has an obvious frustration with the move of the Bosnian Serbs and the Krajina Serbs into Bihać, and their actions are intended, among other things, to stop that. We hope that's successful and that the Serbs will stop their offensive in Bihać. We have urged the Croatian government not to extend their offensive beyond that objective.
Germany has also expressed its support for Croatia's ultimate goal of the full reincorporation of Krajina into the Republic. France and Britain have both demanded an immediate end to the fighting. Britain warned it threatened to ignite a wider war in the region. However, Russia denounced what it called feeble protests by the West, accusing it of actually showing solidarity with Croatia's military action. We're joined now from Zagreb by Dr. Ivan Šimonović, who's Croatia's Deputy Foreign Minister. Dr. Šimonović, could you first of all tell us about these reports that Washington has given you an amber light for your Croatian offensive? Is that true?
A number of countries are having an understanding for Croatian action. We were forced into the military solution. We were trying to obtain reintegration by peaceful way, but it simply didn't work out.
But did Washington actually say to you, look, okay, go in and try to recapture the territory you lost in 1991?
We are a sovereign state, and we do talk to a number of countries, but we do not wait for green lights when the essential interests of Croatia are at the stake.
You talk to a number of countries. Does that include the United States?
We are talking with the whole world community. So we are talking also with the United States and taking into account the United States' position in the world order. Certainly, we were also in contact with the United States.
How much territory do you actually want to recover?
We always wanted reintegration of all occupied territory of Croatia, and may I remind you that the General Assembly has designated in a resolution that this is an occupied area of Croatia.
Does that include the eastern Slavonia region, which borders Serbia proper?
It certainly does. It doesn't mean that we are taking any activities in this very moment there, but definitely we want reintegration of all occupied territory.
But President Milosevic has already warned that he's not very happy with what he's called Croatian aggression and has warned that the war could actually widen. Now, if you go and take the territory which borders his country proper, that's going to provoke him into battle with you.
We are taking all relevant information in our consideration in deciding about our moves, in our yesterday's moves, in our today's moves, and in our tomorrow's moves.
Okay, so are you going to be taking President Milosevic's views into account? Have you made a secret deal with him?
No secret deals, and definitely Croatia wants to reintegrate all of its territories, and we hope that we will use as little force as it's absolutely necessary.
Well, you say you hope to use as little force as necessary. You've said you're going to respect the rights, the human rights of the Serbian civilian population, yet already we see pictures of Serbian civilians in the Krajina region badly wounded. How do you justify the bombing of civilian targets?
In the activities absolutely there is a firm instruction to Croatian units that civilian casualties should be avoided absolutely to the point that it's military possible. You can observe that in the advancement, Croatian troops are trying not to enter into the high concentration urbanized areas, but to encircle them in order to obtain a control over the territory and then to negotiate, but to increase our negotiating power.
Very briefly, Dr. Shimonovic, you say you don't want a long campaign. How long do you expect it to last?
We are expecting a rather short campaign. It should be as short as possible and, let's call it, as clean as possible, without not only civilian casualties, but reducing military casualties on both sides to the extent that it's possible.
Dr. Ivan Shimonovic in Zagreb, thank you.
Thank you.
After the break, a full...
Just a minute.
Good evening. After a day of heavy shelling, the Croatian assault on the rebel Serb stronghold of the Krajina appears to have paused for the night. This evening we devote much of the programme to the turmoil in former Yugoslavia. As Croat forces push into the Krajina, the rebel Serb capital Knin is shelled by the advancing troops, oblivious to the hand-wringing from the rest of Europe. But could the casualties inflicted on the Krajina Serbs be enough to bring in their brethren in Serbia and widen the war? The UN spokesman Philip Arnold tells us of the peacekeepers' fears. The embattled Serbs in Krajina tonight launched a missile attack on the Croatian capital Zagreb, driving civilians across the city into their shelters. We'll be talking to the Croatian ambassador about how long the campaign may last and where it may end. The eyes of the world may now have turned from the Bosnian capital Sarajevo, but the predicament of that city has not gone away. We travel down the perilous route from Mount Igman into the city, the lifeline now protected by British artillery. Also tonight, fancy a walk? The Ramblers Association is laying siege to another landowner. They want the freedom to walk wherever they like on Lord Macclesfield's estate. Lord Macclesfield will be telling the director of the Ramblers Association why he and his friends ought to stay out. By this evening, the Krajina Serbs said that every single town in their enclave had been hit. The fear is that if the Serbs hit the Serbs hard enough, then Serbia might wade in, causing the biggest conflagration in the Balkans since World War II. Despite that risk, the United States and Germany have been noticeably muted in their comments about the Croat assault. President Clinton actually defended the Croatians, saying Washington had, though, asked them to exercise some restraint. So what are the dangers? David Sells reports.
At dawn today, General Tudjman, the president of Croatia, unleashed the dogs of war. Knin, the Krajina capital, took a pounding from the word go. Shells fired from the surrounding mountains, landing in the city center. Knin's mainly Serbian population took to the shelters, but destruction was heavy, and a United Nations officer reported serious loss of life. The hospital too went underground.
Operating theater must be put in the cellar because it's very dangerous to work upstairs because of great bombing of city of Knin and near area.
The Croats launched two offensives. That in the south centered on Knin, but included a variety of targets, the towns of Gospic and Gračac, and not least an air attack on the Krajina Serb military airbase at Udbina. In the north, Croatian forces pushed down towards the Bihać pocket, while simultaneously their Bosnian Muslim allies, bottled up within the enclave, thrust out in cooperative mood to increase the pressure on the Serbs. Together, they were trying to cut off their common enemy. For their part, the Krajina Serbs riposted defiantly with a missile attack on Zagreb, the Croatian capital, and shelled any Croatian town in reach. The air was thick with propaganda, and tonight the Krajina Serb self-styled foreign minister insisted, against the odds, that final victory would be theirs.
The
Croatian army bombarded every town in the Krajina Serb Republic. There are many casualties. The damage is enormous. Tens of thousands of shells were fired at us. But the Croatian army has not succeeded in occupying any of our land yet. It is certain that the Yugoslav National Army in Serbia and the Bosnian Serb army will not stand by and watch as the Serb population in the Krajina is slaughtered.
The Serbs of the Krajina region are a formidable lot, but they're outgunned and outnumbered by the Croatian army. To whom then can they look for help? Radovan Karadzic, the leader of the Serbs of neighbouring Bosnia, is their first hope. He will surely do his utmost to bail them out. But his own forces are already stretched in battle against the combined effort of the Bosnian Croats and Muslims.
We are fully obliged to defend ourselves together with the Republic of Srpska Krajina. We are the same nation, the same people, and we are attacked by the same enemies. Certainly we will do many things to coordinate a unique defense, and we will delegate our best officers to coordinate the unique defense.
But it is the Belgrade Machiavelli, Slobodan Milosevic, president of Serbia, who alone could swing things in their favour. That said, the Krajina and Bosnian Serbs both are in his bad books. They've openly flouted his wishes. So, Serbian nationalism or no Serbian nationalism, Milosevic is hardly minded as of now to ride to the rescue.
Milosevic right now has a point. Milosevic's message to Bosnian and Croatian Serbs for the past couple of years was to negotiate and find some sort of peaceful political solution. They have been refusing that, and now Milosevic's message might be, okay, I told you so nicely, now if you didn't want to listen to me, you will have to listen to Dr. Tudjman, who is going to explain the same thing to you in a much harder way.
The Croatian resort to war has left the outside world at sixes and sevens. Russia, as patron of the Serbs, has been blistering in condemnation. Britain and France, with UN troops at risk on the ground, have been pretty unhappy, deploring the decision. Germany and the United States have chided the Croats, but expressed understanding for their efforts to whip a secessionist minority into line.
The Croatian government has an obvious frustration with the move of the Bosnian Serbs and the Krajina Serbs into Bihać, and their actions are intended, among other things, to stop that. We hope that's successful and that the Serbs will stop their offensive in Bihać.
One rather cynical UN view is that President Tudjman hopes to finish his war for the Krajina before the Security Council has time to convene and condemn it. Tudjman's foreign minister today aired the view that I think we will finish this operation in a week, and his defense ministry concurred, saying the campaign had kicked off successfully. And, of course, as this is war, there were civilian casualties. President Tudjman plainly hopes to repeat his success of May, when his army captured the Serb-held enclave of Western Slavonia in 36 hours. He's trying another blitzkrieg. There are no heroes in the Balkans.
Well, we're joined now on the telephone by...
The rebel Serbs suffer their biggest setback in 4 years of warfare. The stronghold of Knin has fallen to Croatian forces. 30,000 Serbs flee the city. And still on course for gold, Linford Christie races through to the World Championship semi-final. Good evening. On the second day of their drive into Krajina, Croatian forces have overrun the capital. The United Nations say 2 of their peacekeepers have been killed and another 200 detained during fierce fighting. Croatian forces say they've made dramatic advances on other fronts, capturing the town of Gracac, north of Knin, and linking up with Bosnian government forces near Bihać. The speed of the advance has forced tens of thousands of Serbs to flee their homes, and the UN has warned of yet another humanitarian crisis.
The Croatian guns fired on Knin for 30 hours, from dawn yesterday, throughout the night, and again this morning. The town the Krajina Serbs called their capital was being destroyed, and Croatian tanks and infantry were closing in from the south. Serb jets were in the skies, seeking out Croatian positions, but on the ground, Serb armor was in retreat. By lunchtime, it was all over. The Croatians claimed Knin was in their hands, and UN observers in the town confirmed it. For the Serb people, it was time to leave. The self-styled president, prime minister, and other leaders are said to have departed in a hurry. Thousands of their people, fearful of Croatian atrocities, were left struggling along the roads. The UN, too, is fearful.
I think humanitarian crisis is looming. There are people now fleeing from the Krajina area to Bosnia and Herzegovina.
But it isn't only Knin that's fallen to the Croatians. They've also made substantial gains further north, where they've met up with the Bosnian 5th Corps, which has been defending Bihać. UN observation posts are deserted. We found this one on the confrontation line in Karlovac. The Croats have used force to remove the UN. 2 more peacekeepers were killed today. Around Karlovac, the Krajina Serb forces are still resisting. There was heavy shelling there this morning. Buildings were burning. The hospital was treating casualties. The battle for the Krajina certainly isn't over, but with the fall of Knin and with the Croatians advancing at a speed and on a scale which has astonished the United Nations, the Krajina Serbs would appear to be staring defeat in the face. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News, Zagreb.
The Kashmiri separatists.
The UN speaks of a total and absolute humanitarian disaster as thousands and thousands flee the Croat advance. It's described as the most widespread campaign of ethnic cleansing for 3 years. 2/3 of the Serb population of Krajina are on the move. Hiroshima falls silent. Painful memories 50 years after the bomb. And Linford Christie loses his crown. He finishes 6th and in agony. Good evening. The UN says the Croat offensive against Krajina has caused a humanitarian disaster. It's estimated that 150,000 Serbs have fled their homes. Roads across northern Bosnia have been blocked by people in cars, lorries and any other kind of motorized transport. The Croatian government has said it wants Serb civilians to stay in Krajina. Most of the refugees from there are passing through the Bosnian town of Banja Luka. Our correspondent John Devitt has been to the crossing point at Racha, where thousands are streaming into Serbia.
The human cost of Croatia's offensive in Krajina. Tens of thousands of Krajina Serbs on the move, fleeing the advancing Croats. Their only escape route is into Serbian-controlled Bosnia. Here in the town of Banja Luka, the local authorities say they're having to deal with 150,000 refugees. The United Nations has started a major relief operation.
The numbers are very, very large. We haven't had to deal with a situation this big before, but we'll do what we can. But also, the type of displacement's different. Many of these people have left in their own vehicles. Some have a little bit of food.
But the long-term picture for these refugees is bleak. Many have continued heading for Serbia. At the Bosnian-Serb border, a queue of refugees miles long has built up. They're slowly being let through. This woman described how at first they were told to stay put in Knin, but in the early hours of yesterday morning, the shelling drove them from their homes. She says she'd rather be in Serbia than wait for her family to be killed. These refugees provide the Serbian government with a real problem. Having encouraged them to rise up against the Croats 5 years ago, Belgrade has done nothing to try to prevent their defeat. And as they arrive here in Serbia, the economic situation means that their welcome will be less than enthusiastic. John Devitt, BBC News at the Racha crossing point.
The Croats say the battle for Krajina is over. They say the breakaway Serb Republic no longer exists, following a string of victories by their forces today. They've taken the large industrial town of Petrinja in the north, the Serb military airfield at Udbina, and the former holiday resort Plitvice in the heart of the region.
Even the Croats have been astonished by the speed of their advance. They claim their offensive, codenamed Operation Storm, is almost over, just 3 days after it began. When we met these Croatian troops this afternoon, they were relaxed and confident and receiving fresh supplies of brand new weapons. Croatia's army has become a formidable fighting unit, well armed, well trained and highly motivated. Reinforcements like these are being brought up